Hello, everyone. Today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Julie Sawchuk. Julie is an accessibility strategist, and she founded her own company back in 2018 to help people figure out access issues. And I know I'm not doing a fair job of describing it. So we'll get right into it. Welcome, Julie.
Hello, Stephen.
So you are in a small village, you said, in
Yes,
southern Ontario, about 2 hour drive from Toronto, Canada, right?
that is correct. Yep, I live just outside a village of 1,000 people. The little village is called Bly. We have a summer festival theater and a brewery, and that's kind of like the mainstay of our village here.
Wonderful. So tell me a little bit about what an accessibility strategist is.
Well, it's a term that I may have like co-opted from somewhere, and I'm not exactly sure where, but it makes sense to me as a descriptor because you have to develop strategies to figure out accessibility if universal design has not been applied in the construction of a building. So
Right.
ultimately, we would like everything to be built following the principles of universal design, but we all know that that has not happened in the past and it still doesn't happen in every project. So people with disabilities are problem solvers by nature. We have to be in order to basically live day to day, right? And travel and work and all of that. And so being a teacher first, in my first life, I now work to help people understand how to implement accessibility in their own personal spaces and as well as in commercial spaces as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. And you described yourself as the chief everything officer for your company. Do you do it all by yourself or do you have people working with you?
I have some people working with me on contract basis. I have
I
somebody that
see.
helps me with my marketing, I have somebody that helps me with my bookkeeping and all of that, but the actual consulting I do myself. The teaching I do myself.
And are your clients are primarily right now in Canada, correct?
100%. Yes.
Yeah. So talk to me, if you don't mind, about what the consulting looks like. What kind of, especially on the residential housing perspective, or what kind of people reach out to you? What kind of information do you give them around what they need?
Well, I will start by telling you why I became what I did, because I needed to build an accessible home.
Ah, I
And
see.
I could not find much in the way of help,
How long ago was this?
resources, information, all of that. So in 2015, I sustained a spinal cord injury. I was riding my bike. I was training for a triathlon and I was hit from behind by a car. And
My
the,
goodness.
the impact of the car and being thrown into the ditch 30 feet shattered two of my vertebrae, which damaged my spinal cord. So I have T4 paraplegia and I use a manual wheelchair. And I spent, I had life-saving surgery and all of the trauma that goes along with that, trauma and drama. But I came home to a 2-story, 115-year-old farmhouse on 10 acres with a gravel driveway. So I moved back home after being in hospital for 3 months in rehab. I moved back home to my 115-year-old farmhouse on 10 acres, 2-story, with a gravel driveway and, life in the country. It was really, really challenging, physically and, well, emotionally as well. But we made it work. We put a ramp up to the door and we did a little bit of renovating in the kitchen and the bathroom so that it was livable. And then we had to decide what we were going to do. I mean, we brought the bed down into the dining room and we're sleeping in the dining room. So it's, not exactly
Wow.
ideal. And the possibility of renovating the house was there, but to renovate what we needed to was going to be way, way expensive. And we decided that it was actually worthwhile to construct a new house. So that's what we
Wow.
did. Yeah, we
Wow.
built a house on the same property right beside the old house so we could take advantage of some of the services that we still had here. Plus, we have 10 acres, so we had the land that we could do it on. But I had no information. I had,
Yeah.
I had no idea what to do,
Right.
right? Where to start. And reaching out to local architects was somewhat helpful, but nobody had built a completely universally designed wheelchair accessible home before. And I really wish that I could be able to find that person. I wish I could have been able to find that person. So I became that person. I
Wow.
was my own consultant. I did lots of on the ground research, visiting people's homes and whatnot. And we learned a lot along the way. It took us a little bit longer than we had wanted to, but because we were living in the old house, we didn't have to be out and in, so we didn't have to rush it. So we were able to make wise decisions for the most part. So in doing that process of building and trying to figure out what worked for me as a wheelchair user, there was a lot of learning that happened. And so in all of that learning, and being a teacher, I knew I needed to help other people. And so I wrote my first book, which is called Build Your Space, How to Create an Accessible Home for You, Your Family, and Your Future. And that was like the story of building the house and the things that we learned along the way, as well as the things to think about if you're in that same situation where you need to build for accessibility.
So could you highlight like three things that people should think about, if they're just three really high level things that people should think about if they're building for accessibility?
Absolutely. It's really hard to narrow it down to three things.
Just a few
But
things that come to mind then.
yeah, the thing, and this comes to my mind first because it is the thing that people don't want to think about. And it's the what if, right? Like your current capabilities are not going to be your future capabilities. So in the design of our bedroom and the bathroom, we put electrical into the ceiling, and we made sure that the trusses were load bearing so that if I needed to have a lift to transfer myself, from bed to chair or chair to shower, those kinds of things, the infrastructure was there. We didn't install the lift, but we installed what we needed to future proof
Right?
that.
People don't want to think about, because we have a saying, that I hear often about how any one of us could become disabled at any time. People who think that there's no such thing as immunity from loss of mobility or loss of cognitive function either. We just think we're immortal, and especially when we're teenagers and we're in our 20s, right?
Well, and I mean, even when you're 80, I have 80-year-old parents that don't want to build a ramp into their house because
Wow.
they are perfectly capable. And I'm like, okay, I'd like to be able to get into your house, and you will eventually need a ramp so that you can
Yeah.
stay in your house, right? So,
Yeah.
ramps are a pretty controversial thing in a lot of places. But so that's one thing, is thinking to the future. What can you implement now? And the thing about thinking to the future now is it actually saves you money, right?
Yes.
By
Absolutely.
installing electrical as the work was being done saved us a ton of money, as opposed to having to send an electrician up into the attic and move all the insulation and drill in and blah blah
Right.
blah, all of that. So implementing universal design and accessibility at the get-go totally saves money.
And the other thing about, you're talking about ramps. I mean, I find it ironic, if a parent has a baby and they want to, you have a stroller and take the baby out for a ride or out to a walk to the park. Why do they want to make it harder to get the stroller in and out of their front door? Why, it's like you could do ramping in such an aesthetically pleasing way.
Yeah.
I sold a home a few years ago near where I live that you wouldn't even have known, you wouldn't have thought the home was ramped because the front yard
Well,
was so beautifully manicured and landscaped.
and that's the thing too. You shouldn't have to build a ramp into a new house. You can design the landscape, and
Yes.
you can grade the land so that you can have a building that is flush to the ground. And that's what we
Right.
did. We don't have stairs, we don't have ramps, we have slab on grade, no basement. And yeah, new houses should not be built with ramps. They should be built just to be flush with the ground so
So,
everybody could just walk in.
how did you do the transition? How did it come to be that you said you were a teacher, no
Mhm.
longer teaching, now doing consulting around building property more accessibly?
Yeah.
How did you make that switch?
Well, I wouldn't say that I am just a consultant. I would actually say that I am still teaching. I'm just teaching
Awesome.
a different topic in a different classroom. And
Right.
what really I've been able to do is I am still teaching high school students, but I am also teaching seasoned architects and like literally everybody in between. So like this week I ran a workshop for high school students about accessibility at their local recreation center. And we strategized ways that they could tell the people who run the recreation center how they could make it more accessible for all people with disabilities. So that was like super fun. But I also taught diversity and inclusion education at the brewery down the road. So like
That's
I
cool.
I am literally teaching to anybody who wants to listen, and that makes it lots of fun. But I'm also consulting on projects with people who are also building their own accessible homes. I have a client right now who has MS. She wants to move from her old farmhouse into a new house so that she'll have more energy and be safer. And so I'm helping her with the design, working with the architect and the builder, just to make sure that they see everything through the lens of accessibility and using a mobility device and all of that kind of stuff that goes along with it.
Back in 1990 in the United States, they passed civil rights legislation around disability. It was called the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I know that
Mm-hmm.
Canada and its provinces have had laws that have come into play. How favorable is the building code and the environment in Canada, or specifically with your clients, around supporting these types of modifications or building decisions? Or do you have to go through a lot of red tape to bypass the thinking
Um,
around it?
it's not so much that there is red tape. Like there's nobody and nowhere that says you can't build for accessibility. The problem is the lack of information and the lack of understanding of the need, and the fact that the building codes present accessibility and require it, but the accessibility that is required is bare minimum. It's like the lowest amount that you can do for the least number of people, basically. And
Can you give
so,
an example of where the building code where you are is insufficient?
right. So we were talking about ramps. Best thing for people to picture, right? A ramp with a slope of 1 to 12 is what is currently in the code, but that's tiring and difficult and potentially unsafe for some people and their
So,
mobility devices.
so
It's
what
pretty
you're talking
steep.
about is on a ramp, we're talking about 1 inch of rise for every 12 inches of distance.
Correct. Exactly correct. So better practices or best practices would be 1 to 15. So you have a much more gradual incline, and even better than that is 1 to 20. But builders, designers, most of the time will just go with what's written in the code. Well, if it's written in the
Right.
code, then it must be good. Well, it's okay, but it's not awesome. And why wouldn't we do awesome if we could do awesome?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. So, do you have any particular project that you remember that is of a great sort of satisfaction for you that you acted as a consultant on?
Well, my very own home. And I say that because really it is the best project that I've done. And the what makes it the best is the result that it had for me as a person with a disability. And so I'll tell you the short version of how I came to realize how much accessibility matters. Like your slogan, accessible housing matters, totally says it all. So in the old house, it was like, sloped floors because it's an old farmhouse, right? So, post sink in the basement and all that jazz. So I could not just take my hands off my wheelchair and expect to stay in one space, right? I would roll
You'd be
backwards
rolling
or
somewhere.
forwards or sideways, right? Like I would
Yeah.
go, you throw up a bunch of ping pong balls in the center of the house and they would all roll to separate corners of the house because nothing was level. So what it meant, that's just like one piece of it, but what it meant was everything I did was requiring more energy. So getting milk out of the fridge, I'd have to open the door, roll away from the door, roll back in, put my brakes on to reach the milk and bring it out. Because if I didn't put my brakes on and I reached in, I would roll away from the fridge. So
Wow.
every single little action that I took in that old farmhouse required more energy. And I didn't know that until we moved into this house. About 2 months after we moved in, like we moved in right at Christmas time. So it was like, yay, exciting, new house, everything's awesome, family, everybody can come. And then like, oh yeah, it's bright, it's white, it's clean, old farmhouse. Blah. So to move into a new space was like, yes, it's so good. And then, 2 months later, I was still feeling good and positive and lighter. And I realized that I had more energy, and getting out of that space and moving into a space that allowed me to be more free and be more independent and not struggle with every task that I did meant that I had more energy. And I was just like, that's the answer. Accessibility equals energy.
Ah,
Right? So that's like one of the main points of my book, Building Better Space, is how accessibility adds up to give people independence, dignity, and safety. And all of those things together equal energy.
wow.
Preserved physical energy. So then I had energy to work, to consult, to exercise, to play with my kids, to grocery shop, like all the things that I didn't have energy to do before.
Yeah, yeah. So is there a role that you have? You talk about being a teacher. Many of the people that I encounter in my world, probably can't afford to hire a consultant. And they're living in a place, maybe they're talking about doing something they can't afford to build a new house, certainly.
Right.
Maybe they're
Yes.
in an apartment style thing. How do we get the stuff that's inside your brain about universal design to communities that are limited financially or limited geographically around what they are able to do?
Right. Um, if you can do like an audit of your day, right? Where are you spending the most amount of energy for your day? Is it having a shower? Like, is that where you are exhausted after having a shower, or you something that you put off because it takes more energy? Like I sometimes even just shower every other day because showering still takes energy, even though I have like the perfect setup. Um, so where is it that you spend more energy than perhaps you need to? Once you've identified that action, that activity, or that place, then you start breaking it down into, what is it that takes energy? Is it because you have a shower drain that's a center drain that slopes in multiple directions, and therefore your mobility device is like slightly off balance, so you hesitate when you transfer from your shower chair to back to your wheelchair because this everything's on wheels and it's all a little bit rocky and it makes you nervous. So if you can take the time to think about your everyday activities, which ones are costing you the most money, not the most money, which ones are costing you the most energy, and then engage a professional, engage an accessibility strategist, engage an occupational therapist, talk to your physiotherapist, talk to your doctor, talk to a nurse, like talk to somebody that is outside of your everyday and brainstorm. Right. And you look at the spaces that are the most potentially dangerous in a home, it's the bathroom and it's the kitchen. Right. So if you wanted to start in a space, I would actually say start in the bathroom, because water is what creates hazards, right? Slip hazards, whether it's, grabbing onto something in the shower because you need balance, or whether it's a set of wheels that's actually hydroplaning on a surface because there's not a lot of grip on that surface. Right.
Right.
So that's the place I would start, is in the bathroom, and do like okay, this is how I brush my teeth. This is where the energy goes when I brush my teeth, because I'm doing it side saddle in the, beside the sink, and I have to really raise my chin up to get my chin over the sink so that I can spit toothpaste into the sink and not dribble it down my chin. Right? Like,
Right.
where are you losing energy where you don't need to?
Right. Right. Do you find when you do your teaching and community outreach that that people have aha moments and like, oh, I never thought about that
Oh,
before? And what kind of typical things do people have the most new awareness that they gain as a result of your efforts?
I constantly have aha moments. Most of them are Well, I saw that, but I didn't realize what it was for, right? So talking about like tactile warning indicator surfaces coming up to a crosswalk or on a curb cut. Um,
Right,
talking about visual fire alarms, right? People are like, well, I knew that was a fire alarm, but I didn't know why it had a light on it. And,
right,
so those are the aha moments, the things that people see all the time, but aren't necessarily tuned into who benefits from them. And then the other aha moment I often have is because I talk about toilets a lot and accessibility related to toilets and bathrooms. And, everybody has seen a grab bar, but unless you use a grab bar yourself, you don't know how people use grab bars. So I actually talk about how I lean on a grab bar. When I'm sitting on a toilet, I lean on a grab bar to pull my pants down. I shift one direction, pull pants down on that side, and then I lean on a grab bar, hopefully on a grab bar, a full down grab bar on the other side of the toilet. And then I do that back and forth, side to side until I get my pants down. And then I do the same thing when I'm pulling my pants up. And if I don't have those grab bars there, my safety is compromised, my ability to use the toilet is compromised. Sometimes I can't stay because I can't use the toilet at all, and I have to go and find a toilet that is accessible. So people are like, oh, I didn't, I didn't think about what people are actually using grab bars for. It's not just
right,
a catch me when I fall kind of thing. Yeah.
right, right, right. Wow. So, you had quite a traumatic life experience, and from where you were at, and you told me about how active you were. You've mentioned training for a triathlon, but you come across as a
Yeah.
very cheerful, upbeat person. How did you manage to stay? I mean, a lot of people would look at your changed circumstance and say, oh, this, there'd be this whole pity syndrome. You're in a wheelchair and you can't do this and you can't do
Mm-hmm.
that. Yet
Mm-hmm.
you have changed your life from one type of teaching to another type of teaching, as you say, and you seem very positive. Can you share with my listeners how you achieved that?
I think that's a whole nother book. Um, I'm not, it's really hard to pinpoint any one thing because it's my family. I have two kids. At the time of my accident, they were 8 and 10, and giving up was not an option. It just wasn't. I needed
Mhm.
to figure out how to live so I could do it with them.
Right.
I have a husband, same thing. Like giving up, giving up on my marriage was not an option. Um, and the support that my family, my immediate family and my extended family has always given me, and they've always been there for me. So I'm very fortunate to have that kind of support. I had a tremendous amount of community support. I was relatively well known in the community as a teacher and a coach and all of that. And then of course it was a very public incident that was my accident, and everybody, like, it was on the radio and everything, like everybody knew about it. And so there was a tremendous outpouring of support. And when I started to reach out into the community to talk about accessibility, nobody ever turned me away. I should say most people didn't turn me away. There's always
Uh,
somebody, right? There's always
right,
somebody.
right, right.
But I had a lot of support for um I had a lot of people that wanted input. They wanted to do better.
Right.
And that it feeds me. I mean, the work that I do, I say that my job is easy because it is, because I only work with people that want to make a difference. I
Right.
I do not go knocking on doors and saying, "Hey, you're not accessible. Um, you need to hire me to help you be more accessible."
Right.
Because they're like, "Meh, I don't know." And I don't have time to fight and have that dialogue. I don't have the energy for that. I work with people who are smart enough to know that they are not the experts and that they need expertise to help make their spaces more accessible, whether it's their own home or whether it's their commercial space. Um, it's It's the smart people that know they're not experts. They don't have the lived experience. They don't have the lived experience yet. Um, and they know that they can count on me to help them see through the muck of
Wow.
what is going to make the difference in their space.
This is great, Julie. I really appreciate you coming on my show and talking to my listeners about this. As we wind down, I have one question for you. What advice would you give to people listening to my show all over North America, um,
Yes.
around um, what they should do if they have an inaccessible space, but they don't have a Julie Sawchuk in their lives? Apart from calling you, and
Yeah.
we'll get to
Find
that in a
me.
minute. I don't know how. Maybe you're anyway. Apart from them reaching out to you directly, what how can how can people get the support they need? What would you say
So
to them?
I've been having a lot of conversations lately about lived experience and people with lived experience being the experts in accessibility because they are, and they're experts in their own story and their own situation. So commercial spaces, people that own and run commercial spaces should be reaching out to their clientele, their customers, their patients, whoever they are, and asking them, how is my space working for you? And what could I do as a business owner to make it better? And just start collecting that feedback, right? And then from from the perspective of somebody who's maybe wanting to build their own space, you really do need to find an expert. And I'm shocked when I am asked to, participate in a quote like an RFP for like a major recreation center or something like that, at the list of experts that are required for the RFP, right? Like a lighting specialist, a landscape architect, like a furnishing specialist, color, like paint color specialists, and yet
No
often
accessibility
no
specials required.
accessibility specialists,
And I think that's
right?
changing. That is sort of changing around these big projects and the
Yeah,
need to start thinking about this. Especially, I can only speak about my environment where there's legislative pressure to do that. I wish we
yeah.
had more time. In the last few minutes, Julie, can you share with my listeners how they can get a hold of you, how they can learn more about what you do?
Absolutely. The best way, if you're an Instagram person, is to follow me on Instagram, and I am the Julie Sawchuk. Sawchuk is spelled Sawchuk. Everybody wants to put like an extra C at the end there. There's no extra C there. Anyways, so you can look me up on Instagram and follow me there, and you will find me talking a lot about toilets. I do a Toilet Tuesday special.
No way.
Yeah, absolutely. Every Tuesday, I am talking about toilets, and some of the stories that I share are pretty random, and you would be like, "Really? Somebody did that?" Grab bars upside down and ridiculous things. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can find me there as Julie Sawchuk. My website is juliesawchuk.ca. I'm up here in Canada, so feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to share my experiences, to sell you my books, because I have 3 books that are there available on my website, including Building Better Bathrooms. Not just about toilets, it's about the whole
Yeah,
bathroom. But
absolutely.
it's the book that will help you build a bathroom beyond code. So building beyond code is something that I talk about all the time. Code is not good enough, and I'm happy to help you figure out how to make your space work for you or your customers in the best physical energy saving way as possible.
Well, I really appreciate again your time today and coming on my show and speaking about your lived experience and about
Mhm.
the work you do. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Stephen. It has been wonderful, and I look forward to hearing from your listeners in the grand old US of A.